It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about before we get into all of the big stories and issues of the day. Welcome to our friends in Chicago on WCPT, 820 AM, Chicago's Progressive Talk, and also in Minneapolis, Minnesota, KTNF AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Welcome to the program. Looking forward to a long and healthy discussion on how we move the country forward. How do we rebuild the prosperous working class and, well, get stuff done. Make lives better. And I got to tell you, I'm going to start right with the fact that this president, Joe Biden, good on him. Guy gets up every day, does his job, and does it well. I saw a thing today, 5.8 million jobs created under his watch. And just the last few months, you're talking about 10 months now? 5.8 million jobs created. The last guy, his 4 years, 2.9 million lost. He is our new Herbert Hoover. Also, jobless claims down, lowest point in 52 years. And you know what we don't hear? And this is the part that I really like about Joe Biden. And I wish I wish he would be a little more willing to take credit. You don't hear him out there tooting his horn. You don't say, hey, look what I did. You hear him going, hey, how do we get more things done? How do we get stuff done? How do we make lives better? How do we help people? That's what I like. And now look, the reality, the right, they're always going to find a reason to snipe. They're always going to find a reason to go after him and attack him for whatever nonsense they throw out. But the reality is things are getting better. They're doing some work on the supply chain. In fact, from what I'm being told out on the ports, they've cut the backlog by almost a third. Because if you know anything about what's going on at the port, there's no room. They got all these containers stacked upon containers. They got all these empty containers on the trailers that you need to move them about. The one guy told me to get to whatever container you need, you usually have to move between 6 and 10 to get the one that you actually need. So by getting rid of some of the excess, kind of paring it down a little bit, a little breathing room, a little move to shuffle around, you're gonna solve some of those supply chain issues. And then prices will start to come down. And look, I love the fact that he has said, hey, you need to go and look at why these prices keep going up, especially in places where there aren't supply chain issues. You need to actually get out there and make sure that, why have gas prices skyrocketed when the production costs are going down? I argued, and I've argued this from the beginning, good old-fashioned American capitalism and opportunism. There's a good opportunity to not let this crisis go to waste, and that's what they are taking advantage of. So, I had to throw that out there. Good on Joe Biden, and good on the fact that he's not out there going, breaking his arms, patting himself on the back like the last guy would do. Now, here's some interesting news. I'm in the place where I'm going, yeah, good news. The NLRB came out and said that the Amazon union election that happened not too long ago, going to have to redo it. Going to have to do it again because Amazon broke, I think, almost every law. When you start looking at some of the stuff that they were doing and some of the harassment and the intimidation and the constant berating of their workforce. In a right-to-work state, this is the bizarre part of this. I mean, they were hammering on these people, plastering the bathroom stalls with anti-union propaganda, forcing them to captive audience meetings. They even got the post office to come drop a box for people to put their ballots in with cameras trained all over them so they could keep track. They paid the local police department to come and harass people. Just the number of things that they did one of those warranted another election. Now, I believe it should have warranted not another election, but a certification saying, look, there's a union here now. You have to sit down and negotiate. We have done that in the past, and it should, this, if there was ever a case for it, it's this one right here. And that's kind of where I'm at in this moment. But as the news story goes, the NLRB said that there should be a revote in the union election. The union was happy, said, look, this is what we've been saying all along. We want the opportunity to go back and do all this stuff. And look, I've been around this a while. Revotes generally don't go the other way. My problem here is that the unfortunate reality is that they got away with it. And there's no one holding them really truly accountable for the things that they're doing. And this is the frustrating part. And now they didn't do anything that, well, everyone else hasn't done. They brought in the high-priced union busters. They brought in all of the people doing the tactics. They did the captive audience meetings. They did the flyers. They did the constant berating on the shop floor. They did all of the things that union busters do. And they did it. They did it well. It got voted down 2-1. And it's one of these moments where you go, well, hold on a second. This is the weird part of the world that we're now in. In a place like Amazon, where they have 150% turnover, well in excess of 100% turnover, means every year no one works there next year. So if you got hired last year, you're not there today. So all of the people who went through that election, well, they're not there. And the problem is the folks that were there to help fight for the union, the folks who were there to help move things forward, well, unfortunately, they're all gone. And this is the crazy part of all this. Looks like, again, going to have to start from the beginning. And this is part of, a really, difficult moment. Because, if you're a union organizer and you're someone who's doing this kind of work and you're someone who's pushing and there's no one left, there's nothing left. This is how a company like Amazon, who basically has a massive turnover rate problem, this is rewarding really, really bad behavior. So for me, the unfortunate reality in this is that we're going to have to figure out if this is the way things are going to go going forward. Can you do the things that they did? Can you do the things that they got away with and be rewarded for it? I mean, this is really, truthfully, a problem. And what's frustrating on so many levels is that our laws are so broken and in so much need of help. And are we in this spot? Are we going to reward that kind of behavior? And sadly, the reality, are we going to let that happen constantly? Is that going to be the new normal? And what's frustrating to me is, sadly, that, quite frankly, could be our new normal. if we don't get some things done. Now, there's some good stories going on across the country. There's some great opportunities. There are some things that I think are really important and can be really helpful. Are we going to get them done? Look, I look at what's going on there in Alabama, and you got to ask yourself, is this what we want? So it's going to be interesting to see how this revote goes, especially, like I said, with a company that's got 150% turnover rate, and I guess we're going to reward bad behavior. But I got lots to get to here. Before we go on to the next segment, we're in this great moment. Labor is seeing a revival. We had Striketober that led right into Strikesgiving, and now heading into, well, Merry Strikesmas maybe, which could take us into the new year. And that's why I have asked our good friend Sarah Nelson to come talk with us. Sarah is the president of the Flight Attendants Union, the American Flight Attendants Union, the AFA. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you taking time for us. I'm really excited about the fact that we're in some interesting places right now. The fact that you've got the NLRB coming out right now and saying we're going to have to redo an election. I think that's a good something. I wish they would have said no new election. We're going to impose a union. But we're in interesting moments, aren't we?
Yes, we are. And I just sent some AFA organizers down to help out in Alabama. I think other unions are doing that as well. We're all getting our arms around that and trying to help as much as possible because, yes, they should just recognize the union after all of what the company did to try to diminish that vote, to try to turn people off. And as you noted, with 150% turnover, it's quite a chore to continually try to organize people who are constantly leaving the workplace. And let's recognize from the beginning, Amazon hired an extra 2,000 people to try to pad the list so that they couldn't even qualify for an election in the first place. So they're willing to do anything to try to keep the union out.
Yeah, it's one of these moments where, bad behavior is most certainly being rewarded. And as I've said for a long time, we've got to, on some level, hold them accountable when they break the law. And this doesn't seem like accountability to me.
Well, no. I mean, there's no accountability in the law. There's certainly no accountability in Alabama. I mean, look at the miners' strike. People have been struck by vehicles 5 times for legal picketing, and no charges have been brought against the people who have hit those picketers. And yet a judge says that the mine workers can't be within 300 yards of any mine entrance in order to picket and protest and keep the scabs out. It's completely lopsided. But I mean, when the labor movement started, we were getting gunned down, and there was incredible violence in the workplace, and there were incredible odds to overcome. And what it took was people coming together and having all the sit-down strikes, having mass strikes across the country. And that's what brought us initial labor law in this country in the first place. And then it got chipped away from there because we somehow thought that we had won and we could organize up from there when, the struggle is never over. So I think that this is a moment where we're starting to see American workers recognize that we've got common interests here, that we've got similar issues. If you look at the strikes going on across the country, the issues are identical. And so workers are seeing that, and they're having a shared experience, especially coming out of this experience with the pandemic, where workers were treated even as disposable. Their lives were not even recognized. So I think that there is a real potential for workers to overcome the incredible hurdles and incredible odds that are stacked against us by the courts, by the courthouses, by the state houses, and by politics, by money in politics. And we have an opportunity, when we understand our worth and people stand up and take action together. Look at the airport workers in Denver who struck. And suddenly, out of nowhere, there was $4 an hour for all of them when there was no money for them before. So there's real power in collective action and in action in our unions. And when we organize in our unions, of course, we can hang on to that. It's not a fleeting thing that we get for a moment and then can be taken away from us, a week later, a month later, or a year later.
It's amazing. It's amazing how they find all of those resources. We found money under the cushions. We can now pay you a living wage. It's amazing how that happens.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that the massive inequality and extraction of the value that we create has created a lot of wealth for a few people, and there is plenty of money to go around. So if it's not the direct boss, it's the boss that is contracting that work with that boss who is going to pay, because at a certain point they're going to say, make it stop.
No,
and they're going to pay.
Absolutely. And that's where we were back in the 30s and into the 40s. The employer class said, the workforce came together, they organized, they sat down, they did all kinds of stuff, they marched their feet, and the employer class was, please, we want peace. And that's how we got the NLRA. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't something that a benevolent FDR said, oh, look what I'm bringing you. No, it happened because, we need to make sure that people are accountable.
Yeah, I mean, they got to a place where they recognized that collective bargaining was the better option than constant strikes. But it was only the threat of those constant strikes that had them believing in and talking about collective bargaining. And today there is, zero recognition of the value of collective bargaining. And so we're going to have to build that same desire to want, for the owner class to want collective bargaining. And that's going to be with, clear threats for strike activity all over this country.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Now, and again, it's my view that the only way we bring this country together and move forward is in the workplace. I think we're so polarized in every other place. I think in the workplace is where we have an opportunity to come together. And as I've said a bunch of times, on election night 2020, I left the polling place. I went to lead a strike of 55 striking workers, most of which had voted for the former guy. But they were fighting the righteous battle, better wages, hours, conditions, and all of that stuff. To me, that's the way forward.
Well, and that changes things, and that has us talking with each other instead of tearing each other apart. And that's where we're going to find solutions. That's where we're going to find our way forward. And
exactly.
The truth is that
Can you hold that thought? Got to take a break right here. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1930. That was the day the world lost the miner's angel, Mother Jones. She had crossed the country many times over, been involved in practically every strike that built the labor movement, stood with miners and steelworkers, and mill children everywhere. Mother Jones had asked to be buried with the Verdun miners killed in the massacre of 1898 at Union Miners Cemetery in Mount Olive, Illinois. Dozens of labor leaders, including AFL President William Green, attended her funeral in Maryland, where she had been living. Then AFL representatives, several Illinois miners, and others boarded the Baltimore and Ohio train to accompany her body to Mount Olive. Historian David Featherling describes the scene as her body arrived. A band played Nearer My God to Thee as onlookers bowed their heads and wept. Survivors of the Verdun riot bore the casket to the Odd Fellows Hall, where it lay in state. The town of 3,500, with its strong and violent heritage, was thronged by thousands of coal diggers. At least 15,000 turned out for the funeral. Broadcast on WCFL, the Chicago Federation of Labor's radio station, the labor priest, Reverend John McGuire, gave the memorial address and officiated at the funeral in Mount Olive's Roman Catholic Church of the Ascension. He asked what weapons she had to fight the fight against oppression of working men. Only the great and burning conviction that oppression must end. Only an eloquent and flaming tongue that won men to her cause. Only a mother's heart torn by the suffering of the poor. Only a towering courage that made her carry on in the face of insuperable odds. Only a consuming love for the poor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Remember, check out our website, thericksmithshow.com, for our friends in Chicago on WCPT 820. Welcome. Also, our friends in Minneapolis, KTNF AM 950. Great to have you aboard. I've got my good friend Sarah Nelson on the phone. She is the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA. Their website, afacwa.org, if you want to check out the fantastic work that she is doing. In fact, she is by far my favorite labor leader in the entire country because, look, at the end of the day, it's about bringing people together and being, just a little bit militant. And Sarah, I appreciate you sticking around through the break for us.
Absolutely. You're my favorite too. So why would I not be here?
If you've got a question for Sarah, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425 if you've got a question for Sarah Nelson. Here's the thing. Every time I turn on TikTok or Twitter or I see insanity on planes. Your members and flight attendants are just being sadly brutalized by what we're seeing every day. And I said this a while ago. I think we should be going to ejection seats at this point over these mask mandates and people who just haven't figured out how to behave themselves. What the heck is going wrong with people?
I mean, the first thing that you should know is that it's not really just about the masks. That narrative has been driven by people who want to perpetuate the conflict and a reason to have conflict on planes. And so it's really people who are just angry about being told anything, being given any instruction. It's the absolute pushing of alcohol in the airports so that we're dealing with more people who have had too much to drink and have forgotten how that's going to affect them on a plane. There are people who bring their own alcohol onto planes, even though that's against federal regulations and they can be fined and they're not supposed to be doing that. But yeah, we're bearing the brunt of the discussion in this country that we are at odds with each other and that everything is politicized and that we're in the middle of the biggest crisis that our country, that our world has faced in 100 years. And you wouldn't know it because normally in a crisis, there are leaders who marshal every effort to bring people together around the common enemy, which is the crisis, not each other, and get everyone working together to solve it. And that is just not, we've had the exact opposite experience here with the leadership who was in charge at first in the White House, and then those who have been left behind in state houses and also as different representatives from Congress. So we've had a different narrative in this crisis, and it has kept people in a constant state of not knowing what to believe, where to get good information, and to really distrust any kind of authority. And we have seen the brunt of that, and we have felt the brunt of it on our planes. We're not the only ones. I mean, people working in retail and in the post office and at restaurants, they're all facing this. The only difference for us is that we're stuck with them in a metal tube flying miles above the earth, and we can't just pull over or eject them, as your latest solution is, which I might be behind if we could figure out how to do that with science. But yeah, I mean, it is a problem, and it has been made a problem because we have not had the kind of leadership that marshals the solidarity that people really want to feel in their lives. That's what people will respond to if you simply give them good information and talk about what the real enemy is, which is not each other.
No, you're right. I was just reading a story over at Boston.com where the Transit Authority police arrested a guy because he pulled a knife on someone because the guy was wearing a mask. And I'm going, how ridiculous and childish and idiotic can we possibly be? And that seems to be at the center of a lot of this, that it's come down to this the virus, the vaccine, all of this. And I'm not sure where we're going because the next wave is coming through.
Well, and look, those people have to be held accountable, and there has to be consequences there. People who act out like this have got to go to jail. But I also, frankly, feel like they are a victim in all of this because they have been fed a line of BS that has made them act Looney Tunes and act against their, fellow citizen who is in this with them. Gosh, if we could just build our unions, have a place where people come together around the issues that we all recognize as common issues in the workplace, safety in the workplace, the living wage. Oh, by the way, these are all the things that the union busters have in their handbook are buzzwords that, might mean that a union is coming on. So look out for those and be careful about that. And then tell people that they shouldn't be for a living wage for themselves, which is kind of hilarious, except that it works. But if we can form more unions and we can have the ability for workers to come together and feel that they have a sense of power to change their own lives, then we have a chance for people to come together and talk who otherwise might not.
Yeah.
And we have a chance to heal this country and move forward together.
No, and it's something we desperately need. Do you think, as I do, that a lot of the polarization that we see is because, well, a large segment of the population has kind of been left behind in this economy, and that they're more susceptible to fall for the other's argument, for the divisive tactics that keep popping up?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when we squeeze people dry, and then we act as though their voice doesn't matter, they're going to listen to the first person who comes along and tells them that they matter, whether they're selling them the Brooklyn Bridge or actually trying to feed them a hot meal. So it's a problem when you stretch people that thin and when you treat them as disposable and you create an economy that perpetuates that. That is a problem, especially if you're not willing to address those issues. And that's why the agenda that's on the table right now before Congress is so important, because we have to do things for regular people. And a lot of people want to have the enemies. So we want to talk about taxing the rich in order to do these things. We should tax the rich. We should tax the rich just because it matters for our democracy. But we don't have to tax the rich in order to do good things for the people. Look at the difference between these plans and the size of the military budget. We have the money to do good things for the people. And when you do good things for the people, this reminds me of when I was in Minneapolis the day before Election Day. And I asked my cab driver, so what's your plan to vote tomorrow? And he's like, oh, Election Day is tomorrow? And I said, yeah, what's your plan to vote? And he said, well, that's when I'm going to be doing my other job. And so I don't think I'm going to be able to vote. I mean, if you keep people that busy and that desperate and they don't think that the elections have any consequences for them,
right,
for themselves in their own lives, they're not going to participate. And that's the whole point of stopping these programs. That, the GOP knows that when you break down government, when you break down any kind of safety nets, when you break down any programs for regular people, people are going to check out. They're not going to think that government or any of this process has anything to do with them. And that's about then becoming demoralized and checking out and thinking that they have no power in their own lives. When we give people the ability to understand that they can take on their employers, make a difference right there and then, they're much more likely then to also participate in our democracy. And so the two go hand in hand, and we've got to do the things that help the people on the front lines, that give people the ability to have childcare, to be able to go to work, that give people the ability to care for a sick parent or a sick child and not have to lose your job during that time. And if we don't have those programs, then we're not going to have people who understand what this democracy is to them.
No, you're absolutely right. And we have a media culture that focuses on, I think, on the if it bleeds, it leads mentality. And I point to this most recent story written by Judd Legum over at Popular Information at his Substack. He pointed out that one of the stories in San Francisco of a guy filling a garbage bag full of stuff. Somewhere, I guess it was worth between $200 and $1,000. It was reported on some like 300 odd times between June 14th and July 12th. But when Walgreens got caught stealing from its employees, and we're talking millions of dollars, Back in November of 2020, when they agreed or they paid $4.5 million to settle a class action suit, it got one story. And you go,
Yeah.
am I missing something here?
Well, no, you're not, because the truth is that people can identify with the one person and they can say, how could he? How could she? And they can feel better in their own lives. And we can use the shame game. And that's what keeps people from talking about the fact that they can't afford their rent. I mean, we poverty shame all the time to keep people quiet. And people can relate to those individual stories. They can't actually relate to this big corporation. There's nothing to relate to there. And so, they get away with murder essentially. Or they decide that they're going to just build a spaceship and go to the moon, or Mars. And so we have to recognize, though, that if we're talking about real people, those are the stories that people can relate to. And that is how we're going to change this world. And so that's why when I say, if we're totally focused on taxing the billionaires, taxing the uber rich, people can be mad at them. But number one, those people are never going to vote away their money. Okay. And so if we're putting that hurdle in front of us for doing good things for people, it's never going to happen.
Right. But
also, we can't relate to those people. Let's talk about the needs of the people on the front lines and what's happening with them. Let's talk about the fact that flight attendants who are facing this violence at work, 61% of the time, that's also accompanied with sexist, racist, or homophobic slurs. And people are being attacked very personally. Let's talk about what people are going through and what it feels like then to put that uniform back on when they have to go to work, and take that on even before they go to work and feel the heaviness of that, and have their families say, are you sure you want to go? We don't want you to go. We don't know if you're going to be safe. Let's talk about those things and see how that affects people, and see how we can actually move people to demand from their representatives that we fix these issues. Yeah, so we should learn from that and organize around it.
And I wish they would do in every workplace what has happened on airlines. With the kind of fines and the penalties that might be coming. Now, I've read that the fines and penalties aren't what we think they are. They usually reduce them down. But they're a lot better than the restaurant worker who's getting things thrown at her or argued with or spit on, or the insanity that we see in these places, which, I don't know why anyone does those jobs in this moment. And thank goodness they do, and I wish them the best. But we also have to do something to protect them.
Yeah, but let's also recognize that those restaurant workers are usually working for tipped wages. And so what that means is they're earning $2 an hour from their employer, and counting on that person who is spitting at them or sexually harassing them to give them their wages. What kind of a system are we setting up there for people to be exploited? So yeah. I mean, you're right. Let's have some actual consequences for people so they understand that the rules actually are the rules. I mean, this is basic stuff when you're raising children, right? Or for a teacher who has to run a classroom with any kind of order to keep everyone safe. But beyond that, though, let's recognize that the vast majority of people actually want to be helpers and actually want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And so if we look for leaders who are going to bring us together and actually promote solidarity, we're going to have a better experience too.
No, I'm right there with you. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Sarah Nelson, president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA. AFACWA.org, their website, if you want to take a look at the work that they do. Last line of questioning I've got for you, and I'm looking at the Biden administration, 5.8 million jobs created during his tenure, the lowest new job claims that they're saying in the last 52 years. Things seem to be moving in the right direction. At least that's what it looks like from my perspective. I'm curious, how do you think Joe's doing to this point?
I mean, Joe, can I say it, Rick? He was handed a shit bag. I mean, he has a lot to clean up here, right? We are literally in the middle of a 100-year crisis that is still going on, and that is not going to end unless we get the entire world mobilized to end it. And so I think Joe gets pretty high marks for what he's done with a pretty divided Congress. So let's recognize that too. It's not as though he can just wave a magic wand and do everything he wants to do. he's done some really good work, and he put in place again the program that we had, which was Workers First. And the results of that have meant that the airline industry stayed intact. But what that really meant was that the workers stayed connected to our paychecks and our healthcare and paying taxes and doing all of those things. And now we're talking about all these people back in the air. Guess what? Where we gave money to corporations and they could spend it and they could decide how they were going to spend it, that's where we're seeing inflation. In the airlines, where we said the money can only go to the workers, there's no inflation. And in fact, airline ticket prices have gone down. So isn't that very interesting that while we're talking about inflation and why we can't do things, the rest of the things that we need to do for people, because that's going to create more inflation, that's BS too. It's about how we structure our economy and how we tell people how the money has to be spent. And if we're building it from the ground up, it's going to work. And if we build it from, if we agree with this mythical perception of trickle down, then we're going to have the experience that we've had to date. And Joe has been fighting against that and building something from the ground up. And so for that, I give him high marks. I think the rest of us have a job to do, though, to get him the support that he needs to get the programs that he's been talking about and championing, and to get things like the PRO Act that he has been an advocate for. Now, where I would give some criticism is that the President of the United States does not need to stay neutral in these strikes. The President of the United States needs to stand for the people and should get involved in these strikes and settle them, make sure that they're getting settled, because there is no respect for collective bargaining. And absolutely, that is the President's job to make sure that collective bargaining does work. So that is my big criticism of the President. But otherwise, I think all of us have a lot of work to do to get behind the policies that he's trying to put in place and the job that he's already done, and talk about that and how much he's done to turn our country around.
No, you're absolutely right. Maybe he could borrow some comfortable shoes from Barack Obama. They're unused.
Yeah, except, not the ones that Obama wore to Wisconsin. Oh, wait, he didn't wear shoes to Wisconsin. No, I think...
That's why I said they were unused.
Get the president's... I see. Yes, you're right. It's not just about saying the word union. It's about actually respecting unions and union members, especially, and that collective bargaining.
Sarah, I appreciate the time. It's always great talking with you. I hope you'll come back again and talk to us again real soon.
Thanks so much, Rick. And I'm so happy that you're getting out all over the country. Everybody donate to Rick. We need more Rick everywhere.
There you go. I like that. More Rick everywhere. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah Nelson, president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, afacwa.org, their website. Make sure you take a look at the work that they do. Fantastic stuff. Back after this with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the National Labor Relations Board began hearings on an unfair labor practice brought by the International Mine, Mill, and Smelters. Mine Mill had been fighting the union-busting tactics at Eagle Pitcher Lead Company. The union had been organizing lead and zinc miners in the tri-state area of Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. During the Great Depression, they built the union by emphasizing safer working conditions, stressing the hazards of silicosis and tuberculosis. In their book, Deadly Dust, Silicosis and the Politics of Occupational Disease, Gerald Markowitz and David Rosmer note that one of Mine Mill's demands included the elimination of the company clinic. They argued it was used to target and fire diseased workers rather than provide a safe work environment. Mine Mill also organized in other area industries to counteract the near total power of mine owners in the region. When the union called a strike at area mines in May 1935, the area's largest producer, Eagle Pitcher Lead, moved quickly to force a lockout and establish a company union. During the hearings, the union was limited in its ability to raise health and safety issues. They did win reinstatement and back pay for workers fired during the strike, but the case brought national attention to silicosis Texas in the tri-state area. In a letter to Francis Perkins the following year, the head of the Cherokee County Central Labor Body hoped to secure legislation to compel the companies to install ventilation systems and safety devices. He noted the average life of a miner was 7 to 10 years, with many dying in 2 or 3 years. But sadly, a federal standard on silica was still decades away. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So, you may remember January 6th, that little insurrection thing that happened. One of the people, this Ali Alexander, one of the white supremacist guys, evidently he says he's going to comply. He is going to comply with the subpoena because, well, he doesn't have any money. Now, one, I thought this was funny because I think he's finally realized he is not in the big club. While Steve Bannon has taken hey, I'm going to fight this as far as I can. We're going to make a media circus out of this. It's all going to be about me because he's got really deep pockets. Well, Ali says, nope, he doesn't want to go to jail. So under the threat of imprisonment and spending a lot of money that he doesn't have, he will be privately deposed before the committee sometime in December. And look, we need to be deposing more of these people. And I want to see that in public. This nonsense that it gets to be behind closed doors. Sorry, I don't agree. But it is what it is, and we'll see where it goes. Now, as I said in the last segment, the reality is we've got some messaging problems. The fact that Democrats, I don't think, have done a good enough job of selling their infrastructure bill, and especially not the Build Back Better plan. We got a lot of work to do, and here to share some thoughts on how maybe we can do a little bit better. I've asked Steve Pearson to come talk with us. Steve is the co-host of the Swing Left podcast, Swing Left's How We Win podcast. Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So what do you think of Ali Alexander saying, I'll be deposed?
Well, certainly, I think it's good when someone honors a congressional subpoena. That's what everyone should be doing. Sadly, the reason he's doing it is because of lack of resources. So I'm actually really happy to see a lot of these subpoenas going out, and I'm excited to see justice start to be served and getting to the bottom of, what has become like just this asinine normal thing to have these people who are still our lawmakers, elected lawmakers, who were party to the insurrection, who are still serving and aren't facing consequences for their actions. So yes, I'm glad he's honoring the subpoena. I expect many more in the weeks and months to come.
I mean, but for me, this is just going way too slow. Got to be moving this along. Let's get more. This should have been started on the 7th of January. We should be almost done with this by now, with massive numbers of perp walks and maybe building an additional wing onto a local prison somewhere.
Frustratingly slow for everyone, and I think it's important. You talked about messaging too. It's really important that we keep this to the forefront, and because justice does move slowly, and we want to make sure that in the public sentiment that this doesn't just slide into the background. This needs to be on the forefront of everyone's minds.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's the right completely understands how to do narrative. And what they've done masterfully, I think, is they've almost flipped the script on this. I've got tons of people saying, no, it was a patriotic day. It wasn't an insurrection. It was the most glorious day of democracy we've ever seen. And I'm going, no, they were defecating on the floor. That's not patriotic.
Yeah, they weren't a bunch of tourists checking out Congress. I've been to the Capitol as a tourist, and it didn't look like the video that we've seen, and more video keeps coming out, and it's frightening. It's awful. Nothing like that has happened in our country. The audaciousness of it. It is absolutely an insurrection. It was not a tourist visit to our capital.
No, it's crazy. Just crazy. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Steve Pearson, co-host of Swing Left's How We Win podcast. If you've got a thought, a question, comment for Steve, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. In looking at this, Steve, the messaging that came out of the Rittenhouse trial, and I'm sure you've paid a lot of attention to this. It was all about self-defense. He was defending himself. And look, I agree. He was defending himself, but nobody really seemed to bother with the other side of this. This is a kid who went looking for trouble and found it, and there's no repercussions for doing that. And this is where I kind of have a problem with where things are going, because it seems to me that we're glorifying vigilantism and idiocy like we saw.
Well, that's the scary result of that verdict. And it wasn't an unexpected verdict. And for anyone who watched the trial go down and watched the clear bias of the judge in that trial, it was, the verdict that we expected, but still very jarring to see it play out that way. And, I'm an organizer, I'm an activist. And for anyone that has been part of any kind of action, marches, and been protesting, this sends a message that's very scary, that someone can cross state lines with an illegal weapon and disrupt a protest. And I think Stephen Colbert said it very well when he said, if what he did wasn't against the law, then we need to change the law, because it was clearly against the law. The judge dismissed the illegal weapons charge or something, he was a 17-year-old with someone else's assault weapon, roaming the streets to, quote unquote, help. It was ridiculous. And then of course there's the blatant double standard that exists. If the script was flipped and he was a black man in the same situation, we would have a very, very different conversation about this. But we did have a recent good result from the Ahmaud Arbery trial, and seeing those so-called wannabe vigilantes who are straight up murderers who performed a lynching of Ahmaud Arbery, all convicted for murder. And that's the way that should have gone. So it's been a very mixed bag for justice in the last few weeks, with trials that we've all been watching very closely around the country.
Yeah, but I look at the one in Georgia, and it was clear. I mean, you saw the video; it was very clear of what was out there. That was that should have been the verdict, and I think everybody knew that was going to be the verdict. The weird thing is we celebrated the proper verdict instead of saying, no, we've got a functional system. It's not about celebrating or being upset. It did the right thing, and we expect that. We're now in this weird place where we're kind of like, well, are we going to get the right verdict here or not? Which is, again, kind of a scary place to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you say everyone was expecting the verdict to go that way, I think a lot of black men and women were not expecting the verdict to go that way, because they're used to having the evidence as, right in front of them, cases open and shut, and still being unjustly prosecuted. And I think that the rise of these videos and the viral videos and the nature of it that has brought this to the public eye for a lot of people who don't experience that kind of violence in their own communities has made it harder for these verdicts to go the wrong way, I guess. But we got a lot of work to do. I think a lot of people were expecting that verdict to go south, and I'm really pleased that we did have justice in the Ahmaud Arbery
Now,
case.
you talked about being an organizer and an activist, and like you, I've marched in all kinds of pickets and been in all kinds of situations. And for me, it wasn't even about the Rittenhouse verdict. It was about what was going to be sent in society. Is the answer now, when I go to one of these protests, that I have to carry a gun to defend myself? Is it going to be that we're going to have to shoot first? I mean, is this the message that we want to send? And I've yet to have people really talk about that. Everyone wants to talk about whether the verdict was right, or if it wasn't right, or any of that. I'm more worried about societally. Where do we end up in this? If that's going to be the message, is that where we end up?
It's an interesting question. It definitely feels like a lot of the time that we are at a tipping point in our society. Certainly, we let off talking about this insurrection that was on our Capitol, and almost a year ago now. So for me, no, I'm not going to carry a gun to a rally or to a protest. I'm going to go there peacefully, and I'm going to bring friends with me, and I'm going to encourage everyone to come with me too, because there is power in our numbers, and there is power in our solidarity, and so it makes it the Rittenhouse verdict makes it more dangerous, and we can't turn away from that as much as it gives license perhaps to more Rittenhouses to come and be disruptors in a very dangerous way. We need to keep standing up, and we need to do it together. So this is we have a long history of protest in our country. You know it better than just about anyone. Unions have led that, and there's been times when violence has happened because of that. But we need to keep moving forward and do it peacefully.
No, I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Steve Pearson, co-host of Swing Left's How We Win podcast. You got a question, comment, for something for Steve? 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. So to the podcast, how do we win? I mean, there's a lot of people looking at 2022 with real concern because the messaging, well, a little shoddy at this point. Maybe it picks up in the new year, but a lot of down heads right now. How do you see Democrats winning?
Well, yeah, it's a loaded title for a podcast because a lot rests on our shoulders, I guess. But there is a lot against us in the midterms. There's no doubt, and your listeners and everyone should be worried about 2022 coming up. Less than a year now, the midterms, and historically, the party that's in power gets us shellacking in the midterms. We have a slew of anti-democratic voter suppression bills that the Republicans have passed in states all over the country. We have gerrymandering run rampant with redistricting happening right now. So yeah, we have a lot to overcome, but we also had 81 million voters showing up in 2020 during a global pandemic to cast their vote and elect Joe Biden president. And we had them show up again to win the majority in the Senate with the Georgia special election, overcoming hours and hours of standing in lines to vote in Georgia. So how we win, the spoiler alert, the simple answer to your question is we all have to get involved. And when you look at the last couple of elections, 2020 and 2018, those elections were really taken over the top by new voters. We built on those majorities, and we recruited, registered, and brought new voters into the fold. A lot of working class voters, a lot of people of color, a lot of people who we don't typically reach out to, who are disenfranchised, and they showed up. We have to make sure that they continue to show up. We have to stay engaged with them and not just be transactional about our campaigns, just showing up in communities like a month before the election and tell them that they need to vote for the Democrat. We've got to stay engaged with them. And the stuff that's going on right now in Congress and from Biden should get everyone very excited about the direction our country's going in. We have I think in the history of our country, the biggest investment in infrastructure, and with the Build Back Better reconciliation package, which I do believe will get passed before the holidays, before Christmas. We're going to have this giant investment in our country that is going to lift people up, and so we need to be talking about that, but we also need to be preaching to the choir, really, and telling the people who showed up in 2018 and 2020, making sure they show up in 2022.
That's the way to begin to move forward. Absolutely. So how can folks get the How We Win podcast? What do folks need to do?
Well, it's everywhere. You find your podcast. You can also go to swingleft.org/podcast and find it there. And very importantly, while you're at swingleft.org, please sign up to volunteer, because that really is how we win. It's not enough just to vote. Sadly, democracy is at stake, and we really need everyone to make some calls to voters, to write some letters to voters, and to get involved themselves, to get involved in your own communities. I mean, that's how we win.
Yeah, and get involved right now by calling your senators and telling them that we need to pass that Build Back Better plan and actually get some more things done, because you're gonna want to have something going into next year's election to say, hey, this is what we accomplished, this is the work we did. And look, I'm happy with Joe Biden to this point, the number of jobs that have been created, the things that have gotten done.
20 million children lifted out of poverty.
Yep.
That's incredible.
And they got to do a much better job of tooting their own horn. But Steve, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you. I'd love to have you back again real soon.
Thanks so much, Rick. Appreciate it.
Good stuff. Steve Person. Make sure you check out his website, swingleft.org. You can also get the podcast, swingleft.org/podcast. Quick break. Right back after this with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425.